I've auditioned for a lot and haven't got a lot. And then Gran Torino came around where he was talking to me. It was just like this little role.
Nah, it's not much different than, going and auditioning for any film and not getting the role. It's just, it is what it is. It's sort of, if you're not right for the role or...
It's that, for me, has always been like my North Star. It's like, just keep your head down and work and don't complain.
Hollywood royalty? Maybe once. But lately, Clint Eastwood's son is raising eyebrows for all the wrong reasons.
Some parts of the business aren't great, but a lot of the parts of the business are really interesting when you get to make a product that people gravitate to.
Rumors are swirling, insiders are whispering, and social media is ablaze with speculation. From wild nights out that ended in disaster to alleged clashes with industry heavyweights, it seems the Eastwood name isn't shielding him from scandal this time.
This is a world that doesn't exist, so it's from his mind. It's an imagination. So,
Could this be a career meltdown in slow motion, or is something far darker lurking behind the scenes? Let's find out. Imagine auditioning for every single one of your father's movies and getting rejected every time. That's not a nightmare. That's Scott Eastwood's reality. Even when Clint Eastwood directed American Sniper, his own son didn't get the call. While Clint raked in Oscars and millions, Scott was out parking cars and mixing drinks just to survive. He actually made more money bartending than he did acting. By the time he hit 35, Hollywood had chewed him up so badly he considered walking away altogether to become a firefighter. But here's where the story takes a darker turn, because Scott's real struggle wasn't just with Hollywood, it was with his father.
If you're not right for the role or there's someone better for the job or, you don't do a good enough job in the audition. There's a lot of factors, right?
Scott Clinton Reeves was born on March 21st, 1986, in Monterey, California. But don't expect to find Clint beaming in the delivery room or announcing his son's birth to the press. No, Scott's arrival was treated more like a scandal to be hidden than a milestone to be celebrated. On his birth certificate, no Eastwood, just Reeves. The truth is, Scott was the product of an affair. His mother, Jocelyn Reeves, was a flight attendant who crossed paths with Clint during one of his many trips in the mid-'80s. What followed was a 3-year secret relationship. Secret because Clint was already living with another woman, actress Sandra Locke, who thought she was his one and only. While Locke was playing the devoted partner, Clint was playing house with Jocelyn in the shadows. She wouldn't find out until years later, during a bitter lawsuit, that Clint had fathered not one, but 2 children behind her back.
And if you have a mother,
Yep.
Who watches the news.
who watches the news, it's not good to be a 31-year-old man and have your mother tell you how disappointed she is.
When Scott was born, Clint's answer was silence. No acknowledgement, no public support, no father figure. 2 years later, in 1988, Jocelyn gave birth to Scott's sister, Catherine. By then, the Eastwood double life had stretched so far it couldn't be hidden forever. Yet Clint still refused to publicly raise them, even while he strutted down red carpets and pocketed $15 million per film. Meanwhile, Scott's childhood wasn't lived in luxury. It was lived in the shadows, in Carmel by the Sea, a small town where Clint once served as mayor. The irony? Scott was growing up in the same city where his father was celebrated as a local hero, yet he didn't get to live the celebrity kid life. He was Clint Eastwood's son only in whispers, not in reality.
At the same time, piecing it all together in what is going to be the palette of the movie and how those characters are different from one another.
When Scott was just 10 years old, his mother Jocelyn made a drastic move. She packed up the kids and left California for Hawaii. It wasn't just for the palm trees or the island lifestyle. It was about distance. Thousands of miles away from Clint Eastwood's Hollywood empire, Jocelyn tried to shield her children from the chaos, the gossip, and the painful reminder that their father wasn't really present in their lives. In Hawaii, Scott grew up in modest surroundings that his classmates never questioned. They had no idea their friend was the son of one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. Clint wasn't flying in to play dad. He was too busy collecting Oscars, cashing multi-million-dollar paychecks, and buying up new properties. Meanwhile, Jocelyn held it together with her flight attendant salary, while Scott picked up construction work and restaurant jobs just to get by. When Scott finally made it to Loyola Marymount University, it wasn't on Daddy's dime. There was no Eastwood trust fund waiting for him, no golden ticket handed down from one of Hollywood's most legendary names. Scott paid his own way, juggling a communications degree with acting classes, hustling auditions, and still using his birth name, Scott Reeves. Why? Because he refused to be labeled the Nepo baby, the privileged heir who waltzed in through the back door.
A lot of things are just intangible. It's not necessarily that someone didn't do a great job on an audition. Someone just might be better suited for that role in that movie because of the whole entirety of the film.
But here's the eyebrow-raising truth. Even without asking for favors, Clint Eastwood allegedly made sure the door stayed closed. Insider whispers suggest it wasn't just about principle. Some say Clint was determined to protect his legacy while keeping his children's careers from appearing handed out. Admirable on paper, maybe, but for Scott, it meant years of grinding in obscurity while his father's name lit up marquees worldwide. Scott later admitted he auditioned for nearly every single one of his father's films and was rejected every single time. Even American Sniper, Clint's 2014 box office juggernaut that raked in over $547 million and 6 Oscar nominations, didn't have room for him. It was a brutal lesson in Hollywood hierarchy. Talent could only get you so far when family politics and reputation were involved.
Of course, Clint Eastwood learned that you have to audition for his movies. Seems weird to me because you'd think he'd know what you can do.
Yeah, no. No. He does not.
His first break? A blink and you'll miss it role in Clint's Flags of Our Fathers, 2006, credited not as Eastwood, but as Scott Reeves. The name meant nothing, the role was minuscule, and no one even realized he was Clint's son. He blended in with the extras, a shadow in the background while the industry buzzed around the Eastwood legacy. After that came low-budget titles like Pride and Player 5150, films so small they either went straight to video or barely scraped into theaters. Scott was grinding hard but trapped in professional purgatory, too invisible to be noticed, too principled to leverage his famous last name. Some Hollywood insiders whisper that this deliberate sidelining wasn't just about tough love. Rumors suggest Clint may have feared nepotism allegations would tarnish his own reputation, or maybe he simply wanted to see if Scott could survive the industry on his own. Either way, Scott's career started as a test of resilience, patience, and endurance, a trial that would shape not just the actor, but the man behind the famous surname.
I was drawn more towards storytelling and filmmaking. I loved that you could create something that would affect people.
Behind all of this was the Eastwood family circus, a clan that could rival any Hollywood soap opera. Clint Eastwood fathered 8 children with 6 different women, scattered across decades and relationships. There was Lori, born in 1954 and put up for adoption. Kimber, born in 1964 to a stunt woman. Kyle and Allison, products of Clint's marriage to Maggie Johnson. Then came Francesca with actress Frances Fisher in 1993, and Morgan with news anchor Dina Ruiz in 1996. Somewhere in that crowded lineup were Scott and his sister Catherine. Children of the affair, Clint reportedly tried desperately to keep quiet. The whispers, the secrecy, and the rumored rivalries were nothing short of tabloid fodder. Some of Clint's kids grew up in privilege, swimming in the glow of Hollywood royalty. Others, like Scott, grew up scraping by, navigating a life of odd jobs and under-the-radar existence, while the world only knew of their famous father. Many didn't even meet each other until adulthood, and when they did, family gatherings weren't warm reunions. They were tense, awkward reminders of just how fractured the Eastwood legacy really was. Sources close to the family say resentment simmered like a silent poison, with jealousies, unspoken grudges, and competition bubbling under the surface.
Just pay attention to the family.
During his teenage years in Hawaii, Scott struggled to keep it together. He acted out, got suspended for fights, and later admitted he had serious anger issues. The son of one of Hollywood's most stoic leading men, he knew exactly who his father was, but he couldn't talk about it. He couldn't ask why Clint was absent, why some siblings got attention while others didn't, or why the world saw him as a celebrity heir when his reality was so chaotic. Scott felt trapped in a bizarre double life, invisible yet burdened with a famous last name, resenting the fame he couldn't escape and the privilege he didn't fully have. When the family returned to California in 2000, Scott enrolled at Carmel High. That's when the whispers started. Some classmates treated him like royalty, eager to trade stories about his famous dad. Others mocked him mercilessly, dragging him through the social gauntlet of jealousy, judgment, and gossip. For a time, he even considered keeping the Reeves name just to escape the constant comparisons, ridicule, and suspicion.
It took a long time in my life to
but we're very pleased with each other.
By the time he got to college, Scott was done hiding, but he still refused to lean on Clint's fortune or fame. He applied for financial aid, worked long hours, and auditioned for roles that paid next to nothing, determined to carve out a path that was undeniably his own. Yet insiders suggest Hollywood never forgot the name Eastwood, and doors were sometimes slammed, not because of talent, but because of family politics, industry gossip, and old grudges tied to the Eastwood dynasty. Growing up, Eastwood wasn't just difficult. It was a public spectacle, a lesson in survival, and a harsh initiation into the cutthroat world of Hollywood long before Scott ever stepped onto a movie set. Then things started to shift. In 2009, Scott landed a role in Invictus. It was another Clint Eastwood film, but this time Scott finally used his real last name. The irony wasn't lost on him. A film about proving yourself under pressure mirrored his own struggle to be taken seriously in Hollywood. At just 26, Scott took another huge risk, signing on for not one, but 3 horror films. Texas Chainsaw 3D would have tied him to a trilogy, yet he still hid behind the name Scott Reeves, desperate to prove he could succeed without riding his father's coattails.
I don't think he likes me in his movies, because here's the thing, he's put me in a few movies, and I've auditioned for a lot.
Filming began in Shreveport, Louisiana in August 2011. Scott hadn't even seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, only the Jessica Biel remake, but he threw himself into one of horror's most iconic franchises. That 7th installment positioned him directly in the lineage of Hollywood horror legends, and still, no one knew he was Clint Eastwood's son. Then came a career-defining moment. In 2014, Scott joined Fury, a gritty World War II film starring Brad Pitt. This wasn't a bit part. He played Sergeant Miles, the newest member of a tank crew. The cast won the National Board of Review's Best Ensemble Award, a rare nod to collective talent. Finally, Scott Eastwood was being recognized on his own merit, shoulder to shoulder with actors like Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, and John Bernthal.
I genuinely like to do movies that are positive. I like something that makes people feel, and it makes people feel good or positive or gives some sort of lesson out of it. I mean, you're really creating art.
But it wasn't handed to him. He endured intense military training, operated real Sherman tanks from the 1940s, and pushed his body to the limit. This was raw, physical, and emotionally exhausting work, and it paid off. Critics began calling him a real actor, not just Clint Eastwood's son. And just when Hollywood thought it had him figured out, Scott took yet another unexpected leap, a turn into romance, in 2015, signaling he was done playing by anyone else's rules. In 2015, Scott Eastwood took another bold turn, this time into romance. He starred in The Longest Ride, a Nicholas Sparks film where he played a bull rider falling in love. Slow burns, impossible choices, big emotions, classic Sparks. But here's the wild part. Scott did his own bull riding stunts. While Marvel stars dominated the box office that year, Scott was quietly pulling ahead. His performance even earned him a nomination for Choice Movie Breakout Star. And suddenly, studios weren't seeing him as just Clint Eastwood's son anymore. They were seeing a rising star. And then he shocked everyone again. Later that year, Scott appeared in Taylor Swift's Wildest Dreams music video, not as a cameo, but as the lead romantic interest, set in a dreamy, cinematic 1950s African film within a film directed by Joseph Kahn. The video was sensual, cinematic, and controversial. Industry insiders warned him against it, saying it could ruin his credibility as a serious actor. But Scott went for it anyway. The video premiered during the MTV VMAs pre-show on August 31st, 2015, and went viral within hours. Millions watched, and all proceeds went to wild animal conservation.
She's got a whole tour to do. She does not need to be talking to me.
Behind the glamour, though, Scott carried a heartbreaking secret for nearly 3 years. In 2017, during an interview with GQ Australia, he finally opened up. Back in 2014, his girlfriend Jewel Brangman had died in a car accident at just 26. The crash seemed minor at first glance, an accident most people would survive. But Jewel didn't. She died instantly, and Scott never spoke about it publicly, not even to her family. The details were devastating. Jewel was driving a rental Honda Civic from San Diego to Los Angeles when she lightly rear-ended another vehicle, causing a small chain reaction crash. No one else was seriously injured, but her car hid a deadly secret. The airbag, recalled in 2009, had never been fixed. When it deployed, the chemical explosion inside turned fatal. A piece of shrapnel tore through her neck, splitting her spine, the single piece of metal that took her life. The airbag came from Takata, part of a recall that eventually affected 24 million cars in the U.S., the largest automotive recall in American history. For Jewel, it was tragically too late.
David called me to do this role, and he didn't really tell me much about it, and there was no script to read. It was sort of top secret. So I sort of took it. I had to say yes.
Her father, Alexander Brangman, was crushed. He had moved across the country to be closer to his only child, his best friend. The last Father's Day card Jewel gave him promised she'd always be his little girl. 3 months later, she was gone. Scott later admitted he had never experienced such a profound loss. It changed him. Dating became harder. Trusting people became harder. For years, he couldn't even tell Jewel's father. In 2017, he admitted, "I still haven't found the right words." Alexander Brangman had begged for answers, desperate for the world to understand just how deeply Jewel was loved.
This is a world that doesn't exist, so it's from his mind. It's an imagination. So, you know.
But Scott stayed silent. For years, he carried the pain alone. And when he finally spoke, it was clear. He wasn't healed. He was still broken. His agony wasn't just about the accident. It was about all the things he didn't do. He never called, never reached out, never tried to change the outcome. That guilt festered, morphing into shame, survivor's guilt, fear, and emotional paralysis. He didn't know how to face a father who had already lost so much. Before heartbreak took over, though, Scott had another kind of guide. Paul Walker, the Fast and Furious star, wasn't just a coworker. He was a friend, a big brother, a mentor. Around 2007, Paul introduced Scott to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a discipline that would later become his lifeline. For Paul, it wasn't just exercise, it was a philosophy, a way of life. He trained under legends like Ricardo Frania Miller and Ron Shiraki.
Did you start training jiu-jitsu there?
I started, one of my good buddies who passed away, Paul Walker, got me into jiu-jitsu.
Even converting parts of his Hawaii home into a personal training center. Paul was a brown belt when he tragically died in 2013. He had planned to earn his black belt, but it never happened until his instructors awarded it posthumously 2 weeks after his death. That belt wasn't just a symbol. It became a torch passed to Scott. Scott embraced jiu-jitsu with the same intensity he brought to acting. It taught him humility, discipline, and control over both physical and emotional pain. "You'll choke some people out," he said, "and some will choke you out no matter who you are." On the mat, fame, muscles, or a famous last name didn't matter. You had to earn every inch. For Scott, growing up in Clint Eastwood's shadow, that lesson was priceless. Jiu-jitsu stripped away expectations, gave him a space to fail safely, and became part of his identity. Joe Rogan once described why it's so transformative. It allows men to release pent-up emotion, confront fear and anger without violence, and stop pretending. That's exactly what it did for Scott.
He got me about 6 years ago. Maybe more now.
Yeah, he was like a purple belt, right? Or a brown belt or something?
Yeah, he was a brown belt when he died.
After Jewel's death, jiu-jitsu wasn't just exercise anymore. It was therapy. It grounded him, gave him structure, and forced him to keep showing up, even when he didn't want to. In a strange way, Paul Walker saved Scott Eastwood twice. First by introducing him to the sport, and again by giving him the tools to survive the devastating loss of Jewel. Paul's death was tragic, but his influence lived on, carried every time Scott stepped onto the mat. Every time Scott stepped onto the jiu-jitsu mat, he honored his friend Paul Walker. Every time he got back up, he honored Jewel. But Scott Eastwood wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to prove he could be more than Clint Eastwood's son. He wanted his own legacy.
I've auditioned for a lot and haven't got a lot. And then Gran Torino came around where he was talking to me. It was like this little role.
That path burst wide open in 2017 when he joined one of the biggest franchises on the planet, The Fast and the Furious. He played a sharp-suited government agent known as Little Nobody, a role written to fill the void left by Paul Walker. And Scott didn't try to imitate Paul. He brought his own charm, wit, and steel. Little Nobody had honor, a love of fast cars, and just enough friction with the crew to earn respect. With the franchise already grossing over $6 billion worldwide, Scott got instant global visibility. And he wasn't a cameo. He helped track down the villain Cypher, proving he could handle high-octane action and superstar co-stars with ease. Then, in 2018, Scott went even bigger. He co-led Pacific Rim Uprising, stepping into the shadow of the original film's legacy. Robots, monsters, explosions, and Eastwood right in the thick of it. Critics weren't all impressed, but the movie still earned $291 million, and Scott held his own through green screens, CGI, and physical stunts. It was a test of whether he could carry a global blockbuster, and he didn't crack.
So many things that are just, that's just part of the film industry, and you can't, the more you just can't take any of that stuff personally. You just keep going out and doing your thing and being you, and that'll
take care of itself.
It won't.
In 2019, he switched gears entirely. The Outpost wasn't flashy or loud. It was raw, brutal, and painfully real. Scott played a soldier trapped in one of the deadliest battles of the Afghanistan war. There were no heroic fantasies here, just mess, fear, and human emotion. Critics loved it. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 93% rating. Veterans praised its authenticity. One reviewer even said Scott sounded like a young Clint Eastwood when he muttered the line, "No, not today." This time, he wasn't just showing he could fight. He proved he could act. By 2023, Scott was back in Fast X. Fans had missed him in F9, but now he returned in full force. With Mr. Nobody gone, Little Nobody stepped up, facing a stacked cast including Vin Diesel, Jason Momoa, and Brie Larson, and still held his ground. The film set up future storylines, hinting that Scott's character was poised to become even more central. In a franchise that constantly reinvents itself, Scott stayed both relevant and invaluable. Then came 2025, and his biggest leap yet. Alarm wasn't just another action flick. It was a 95-minute showdown with Sylvester Stallone, directed by Michael Polish and released by Lionsgate. The story followed two ex-spies trying to live in peace, but of course, nothing stays peaceful for long. Scott wasn't just surviving Hollywood anymore. He was thriving, carving out his own legend, and proving that the shadows of Clint Eastwood and personal tragedy could never hold him back.
You know, he was a busy dad, but he's, you know, a man of few words.
Yeah.
But,
even personally, he was like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, the words he did say were always really important.
A plane crash, a mysterious hard drive, and a deadly chase. They weren't just plot points in Alarm. They were the perfect storm to showcase Scott Eastwood's evolution. Stallone brought the grit, Eastwood brought the fire. The director said watching them together was like witnessing a masterclass in action. And Eastwood didn't just survive the scenes, he matched Stallone move for move. It wasn't just a movie, it felt like the torch was being passed from one generation of action legends to the next. But while the cameras rolled, Scott was building something else off screen, his own empire. Made Here, launched with entrepreneur Dean A. Chapin in 2019, wasn't just another celebrity clothing brand. This was a mission to prove that American-made still meant something. The brand started with basics, t-shirts, socks, boxers, all crafted in U.S. factories, no outsourcing, no shortcuts. Every thread had real American hands behind it. Scott said, "It's the hardworking folks across the country that make our brand possible," and he wasn't kidding.
That is the largest entourage in the history of the morning news.
It's a circus.
It is. And
What are they all doing,
Are
Scott?
they in Sprinter vans or what's going on?
Eastwood wasn't just a face for the brand. He and Chapin were involved in every detail, down to the fit of every shirt. The goal was bold: make high-quality, everyday essentials and tell the story of the people who made them. Each product became more than clothing. It was proof that American manufacturing wasn't dead. It just needed someone willing to take the risk. The brand soft-launched in September 2019, offering early discounts to supporters. But behind the scenes, it was brutal. Designs had to be redone, materials refined, suppliers vetted. Most of these products were normally made overseas, but Scott was determined to do it better at home. This wasn't about chasing trends. It was about pride. Every product came with a story, not just a label. A story showing that America could still create if someone was brave enough to believe in it. But Made Here wasn't stopping at clothing. The vision was bigger, bolder. Scott Eastwood made it clear. Their current line was just the beginning. They wanted to expand into new categories, still made in America, still built on worker pride. This wasn't about selling products. It was about changing how people thought about buying them. It was a movement with teeth, backed by values, grit, and a mission.
It's, you know, it's pretty, it speaks for itself. Right. I think it's made here in America. You know, the whole point of the brand is to create products that celebrate the American worker.
And grit isn't new to Scott. He never had a normal childhood. Not when your father is Clint Eastwood. Not when the world already knows your last name before you even understand what it means. One of the most intense moments between father and son happened when Scott was just 16. He made a reckless mistake. He took his 14-year-old sister to a party and left her there alone. Maybe he just wanted a night out with friends and some beer. But when Clint found out, there was no mercy. Clint didn't lecture. He didn't warn. He grabbed Scott, slammed him against the wall, and punched him in the face. Violent, raw, brutal. Just one message. You never, ever leave your sister at a party. That moment seared itself into Scott's memory forever. Clint Eastwood came from a different time, a time when parenting was about tough love, discipline, and results. Scott later said his father had zero patience for new age parenting. Do something wrong? You got punished. No excuses, no handouts. When Scott asked for $8,000 to buy a truck, Clint didn't hesitate. He said no. Scott had a job. He was earning money. That was enough. Figure out the rest yourself. And figure it out he did. Clint taught him more than survival. He taught him discipline, punctuality, respect for work, and how to take life seriously. Scott credits his father for his hustler mentality. If he wanted something, he had to earn it. Every paycheck, every audition, every risk, it all traced back to that relentless lesson in responsibility, self-reliance, and accountability. One of the biggest turning points in Scott Eastwood's career came in 2022. Warner Brothers offered him a 3-picture deal, including a role in Suicide Squad. For most actors, it was a dream. Big money, massive exposure, instant prestige. But Scott hesitated. Something about the contract didn't sit right. He told his father, "They don't want to pay me real money, and there's no script for the next film." Clint didn't push. He didn't lecture. He simply said, "If it feels right, do it. If not, don't. No pressure, no long speeches, just trust your gut." And Scott walked away. That moment spoke volumes. It showed that Clint wasn't just a father. He was a mentor who taught him that career choices should be about respect, instincts, and integrity, not just fame or money. But their bond wasn't only forged in tough love or business decisions. It was built on stories, wild, scandalous, and unforgettable tales of Hollywood, family, and survival. Every fight, every lesson, every triumph became part of the narrative that shaped Scott Eastwood into the actor, entrepreneur, and man he is today.
Never believe your own hype. Never believe your own hype, you know? Keep working hard.
Now Clint is 94, one of the last living legends of old Hollywood. Scott knows it. Every story, every memory is precious. He tries to squeeze as many tales out of his father as possible. Sometimes they're wild. Frank Sinatra hanging out on set, chaotic movie shoots, moments that feel like they belong in a museum. Clint doesn't share these stories often, so when he does, Scott listens like a student soaking up every lesson. "You're not going to be around forever," he once told his dad, and he meant it. Scott remembers being a kid on the set of Space Cowboys, flying up the California coast in a helicopter with Clint at the controls and him perched beside him. Sometimes Clint even let him hold the controls. These weren't just fun moments. They were masterclasses in fearlessness, focus, and command. That was the man Clint was. Fearless, focused, and in total control. Now Scott is building his own world, carving his own legacy. His next big film, Regretting You, based on the best-selling Colleen Hoover novel, is set to hit theaters on October 24th, 2025. And while Clint's stories shaped him, Scott's own stories of heartbreak, survival, martial arts, and blockbuster triumphs are just beginning to take their place in Hollywood history. The cast is stacked: Allison Williams, Dave Franco, McKenna Grace. The story? Emotional, raw, devastating. A car accident tears a family apart and unravels decades of buried secrets. Colleen Hoover herself is executive producing. Scott knows the power of her fan base, and stepping into this world could be a career-defining explosion. But he isn't stopping there. Next up, Stolen Girl. He plays Robson, a man on a desperate mission to track down a missing child taken to the Middle East. Kate Beckinsale stars as the mother. Filmed in Italy, the story plunges into war zones, international betrayal, and parental love that refuses to quit. Gritty, heartbreaking, and painfully real. Then there's Lucky Strike, a World War II film set during the Battle of the Bulge, directed by Rod Lurie, the same visionary behind The Outpost. Based on a real interview with a war veteran, it's a survival story told through one soldier's eyes. Colin Hanks and Anjinu Ellis-Taylor co-star. Filming kicks off in Bulgaria this November. And don't forget Wind River, the next chapter, the sequel to the 2017 hit. Scott joins a powerhouse cast including Martin Sensmere and Jason Clarke. The story dives into ritualistic murders on a Native American reservation. Scott plays a fish and wildlife tracker brought in to assist the FBI. Dark, layered, and politically charged, it explores justice, survival, and tribal dynamics in the harsh wilderness. Filming wrapped, but the release date is still a mystery. Hollywood has always been a circus for Scott Eastwood, and he's not shy about admitting it. In a 2022 interview, he confessed how the industry had burned him repeatedly. At 35, he was already questioning whether sticking around was worth it. "I've been burnt a few times," he said. "I don't know if I want to do this into my 40s. And he wasn't exaggerating. Behind the glitz and glamour of red carpets and glossy magazine covers, Scott's early years were a harsh grind. Los Angeles and San Diego became the backdrop for a young man juggling construction work, bartending, and parking cars just to survive. He earned $30,000 to $40,000 a year, and shockingly made more mixing drinks than acting. While his father, Clint Eastwood, raked in millions and Oscar glory, Scott was literally serving drinks to people who probably didn't even know he was Clint's son. There were moments when quitting Hollywood crossed his mind. He even considered becoming a firefighter, a real, concrete backup plan, while watching his peers get roles he was often passed over for, sometimes in films his own father directed.
Values are clear, your decisions are easy. As I evolve as a human, I want deeper relationships. I want relationships that challenge me intellectually, challenge my thoughts, get me reading more. I am definitely...
The emotional toll of chasing roles, combined with the unpredictable chaos of the industry, weighed heavily. Insider whispers even suggest Scott endured a few Hollywood favors moments that didn't go his way, forcing him to watch others climb ladders he was denied access to, no matter his talent or his last name. Now, with his late 30s approaching, Scott Eastwood isn't just thinking about movies. He's thinking about building a life, a legacy, and finally taking control of the narrative that has followed him since birth. Scott Eastwood doesn't have a family yet, but he wants one. And the thought terrifies him. He worries about being away from his kids, about the toll an unstable Hollywood career could take on family life. The industry has drained him before, and he's painfully aware of how it can chew people up, exploit them, and leave them hollow. Some sources even hint that Scott has watched certain actors manipulate the system, using relationships, gossip, and favors to get ahead while talented performers like him get overlooked. But there was something unexpected that kept him grounded: Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He got into it because of his friend Paul Walker. They met over a decade ago, and around 6 to 8 years before Walker's tragic death, he introduced Scott to the sport. Paul was obsessed. He had mats in his Hawaii home so he could train anytime, anywhere. That dedication left a mark. Scott didn't just dabble. He trained seriously, and it changed him. On Joe Rogan's podcast, he called jiu-jitsu the ultimate humbling. In a world like Hollywood, where status, validation, and ego are currency, rolling on the mat reminds you of one hard truth. You're not special. You're going to choke some people out, and people are going to choke you out. It's simple, honest, brutally real, he said. It breaks the illusion that anyone in Hollywood is untouchable. You realize talent and effort aren't enough. Sometimes it's luck, connections, or who you're willing to play nice with. And that's the controversial part. Scott's rise, or lack thereof, has never just been about his skill. Hollywood insiders hint at the nepotism, the favoritism, and yes, the politics behind the scenes that have held him back. In Scott's eyes, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu isn't just a sport. It's a mirror to the brutal reality of the entertainment industry. Ego gets you nothing, discipline gets you respect, and humility keeps you sane. Now, as he considers a future with a family, Scott isn't just fighting for roles. He's fighting for control over his life, his choices, and the chance to carve out an identity that isn't overshadowed by the Eastwood name. That's it for today. See you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.